this is Suzanne. I just wanted to do a video talking a little bit about how I passed the NPTE in July of 2020. There were a couple of different resources that I used, and I wanted to share those with you guys who are still working and fighting towards passing this exam. So the first thing that I did was I used Final Frontier. I did their live course, which was 11 weeks, and it included readings and live classes. In the first couple weeks it was twice a week, and then later it was 3 times a week. On top of that, I also made sure to get in contact with the instructor when I had any questions, and he was wonderful about answering them in a way that I could understand. In addition to doing the Final Frontier, so that was the first thing that I did. The second thing was that I did 9 practice exams. So I've had a lot of questions about which ones I took and why I chose to take them. So I ended up taking all 3 score builder exams, 1, 2, and 3. I also took 2 full-length NPTE Final Frontier exams, which were 250 questions. So it was a little bit different than the score builders, which were 200 questions. So at this point, we're at 5 exams. So I also did 2 PET exams, which are purchased through the FSB PT for an additional $99 for 2 tests. They were recently updated in June of 2020, and so if you are a retake student and took the PET back before June, they're now new tests. The great thing about the PET exams is that they are identical to the format, not content, but format of the actual NPTE. So they're a very good gauge of looking at how the software is and looking at what you're going to need to do on your actual testing day. So it has the forward and backward and, striking and highlighting and all of that stuff. So that was very helpful. So at this point, we have the 3 score builders, we have 2 of the Final Frontier, so we're at 5, and then we have the 2 PETs, puts me at 7, and then I also took a 2 therapy ed exams. I thought these were more difficult than the score builders, but really it depends on who you are, because some people say that the score builders are harder, some people say that the therapy ed are harder, so it really just depends on you and your style. The other thing that I did was, while doing the Final Frontier, that's not the only thing that I did, and I'm just being quite honest about how I passed the exam. I loved Final Frontier, and I think that it gave me a lot of the tools that I needed. I also used some additional resources. I always had my therapy ed book and my score builders books just to the side of me when I was studying, so if I wanted to see something in a, said in a different way, then I could open them up and look and see what those texting books said about that, because I like to see it in different formats. The other thing that I used was Score Builders Basecamp. So Score Builders Basecamp is basically a way to test your knowledge, and it's used mostly in conjunction with the Score Builders textbook, but it doesn't necessarily have to be used that way. So the way that I used it was I did the Final Frontier reading, and then I went on to the Score Builders Basecamp, and I found the reading, and I didn't do the reading because I had already kind of done it, unless I needed to see it in another way. And then I would go and do the interactive videos and quizzes and stuff, so that I could just practice my active learning very early on, because when studying for the NPTE, you want to do a combination of active and passive learning. So far what we've covered in this video: I used Final Frontier, the full live class. I contacted my instructor when I had questions. I used 2 different testing books, both Score Builders and therapy ed, and then I also used Basecamp. Now those were a lot of good tools. I also would use YouTube if I needed yet another explanation or if I just needed to look for another test. So what I also used is I also used having a study buddy. In the last 3 weeks, I had a very close classmate of mine that she and I went to PT school together, and we got together every day for the most part for about an hour. And then we also did on Mondays about 2 hours just to kind of cover what we had talked about in the last week. So we did rapid quizzing and just helped each other explain things that we didn't quite understand, which I think was really helpful. So I think those are the main things that I used to pass the NPTE. I made sure to do my reading on what to expect on test day. I spent a lot of time trying to work on getting myself into a good mindset and trying to make the test day itself as low stress as I absolutely could. Because the day of the test, you don't want to be worrying about a bunch of details. Did I forget this? Did I forget that? Oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about test day. I'm not going to tell you the answers. I'm not going to talk anything about the questions because I can't. And to be honest, I don't even remember them. It was kind of a blur. Well, let's just start off the day before. I drove down the day before because my testing center was about 2 hours away from me. It just worked out better for me. Stayed in a hotel, and one of the key things that I did the day before was that I went and checked out exactly where the test center was, where the door was that I went in. It's one thing if you can see the building. Mine was a very small testing center, but if you're in a very large testing center, it's probably good to go the day before and figure out what room you're in, if there's a bunch of rooms, such as if you're in New York City or another large metropolitan area. So the other thing that I did was I made sure that I got all of my stuff together, which included my driver's license and a signed credit card. Now, for people who have a credit card, that's great. If you don't, you can also bring a passport or something, other kind of identification item. But those are the main ones that I would recommend. Then the other things that I did was I made sure to print out my confirmation letter, and I also printed out my authorization to test letter. They did not end up looking at those. However, I did take the California jurisprudence exam, and they did require the authorization to test letter. So I would just recommend to everyone who's testing to have those documents ready just in case they ask for them, and way low stress. If you don't use them, whatever. I'm really sorry to the trees that you had to use to print it out, but I'm sure they'll forgive you. It's way better to do that versus be very stressed on testing day, let me tell you, because there's already so many things going through your mind. So I got that together. I made sure to have a nice bottle of water and some granola bars, some easy snacking things, and my mask. So having your mask, they're going to require you to wear it in there, and for those of you who are in states where they're requiring you to wear masks, beware that all of the prometrics are requiring you to wear a mask. So make sure that you have one to wear. It doesn't really matter what kind you have right now, just make sure that you have one. So on the day of the testing center, how it worked, I went in there, I waited at the door 6 feet from the person in front of me. Luckily there was only one person in line, and then they asked me my name, I gave them my name, and then they asked for my 2 forms of identification, which I did, my driver's license and my credit card. So they took those back and just kind of recorded some stuff on it. Then they gave me a key to my locker. I put my purse and everything in my locker. Before I did that, I turned off my cell phone. Don't silence it, just don't, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Just turn off your phone. So I put everything into my locker, and I actually put my phone into a zip pocket so I didn't accidentally have to grab it while I was grabbing my granola bar and risk something happening, and them thinking that I was cheating. It wasn't worth it. So that's what I did. So after that, I locked my locker, and they gave you the key, and you kept the key. Now there's a key. This is a key thing that I didn't know when I went into it. I'm allowed to have the key. I was allowed to have the key right next to me. So when I wanted to go and get something out of my locker, the granola bar, water, whatever, I was allowed to. Now, when I went in to do the testing itself, They took me into another room where they did a quick scan of my glasses because they wanted to make sure I didn't have cameras. They made me roll up sleeves. And let me just talk about that for a second. What are you supposed to wear? Do not wear pockets. So for girls, I can't really comment on guys, but comfort is the most important thing. You're not making a fashion statement. It's something you want to be comfortable in for 5 hours. So what I wore is I wore actually leggings with no pockets. I wore a tank top, and then I wore a button-up sweater that I had. None of them had pockets. The nice thing about the button-up sweaters, I was able to kind of unbutton it or button it depending on the temperature in the room. And I did get hot and I did get cold, so it was nice to kind of have that. And I would not recommend doing a pullover hoodie because you can't take it off and you can't put it back on, and it just, I wouldn't recommend that at all. So I got to my computer and they gave me a paper sheet. This paper sheet basically was like 4 sheets of paper. It was a folded piece, so it had 4 sides basically. So what I did was I took the 20-minute tutorial time and just got into a good mindset. Don't click through that. Take your time with it. It is your time, and there's no reason for you to rush into it. I know it's very enticing to do that, but I absolutely recommend that you take this full testing time. And I would like to thank David Friedberg from Final Frontier for telling me this advice, because it made a huge difference going into the exam. So another thing to ask is, when you get to your seat, you have the paper, you have the pen to write all of your notes. Raise your hand and ask if you can do your brain dump, which is all of your stuff that you've kind of worked on, that you kind of sometimes are iffy on, that you might forget in question 200 or something like that you want to have written down. Raise your hand and ask them if you can write down that during the tutorial time. They may say yes, and they may say no. Don't just start doing it. It's not worth it. Just ask if you can do that. And I highly recommend that, because then you don't have to spend any of your testing time doing that, which is awesome. So then I clicked next, did the tutorial, got into a good mindset, all that kind of stuff, and then went to question 1. Did section 1, did section 2, and then between section 2 and 3, I took the entire 15-minute break. I was in a very small testing center, so I knew that I could kind of dash right in there in the last 2-3 minutes before my time would restart again, because I knew there was only like one other person that was in the testing site. If you were in a larger testing center, you want to leave more time to go back through security, because they're going to make you take off your glasses again and roll up your sleeves and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So then when you get into section 3, get into a good mindset, take your 20 seconds, do what you need to do. Go into section 4, or take a 15 to 30 second break in between these 2 sections, and just kind of keep tabs on your time at this point. If you're a quick test taker, you're probably fine. If you're a slower test taker, definitely keep an eye on the clock. Then go to section 5, which is your last section. For this section, do not rush through the questions. This could be your make or break section of whether you pass or whether you fail. Make sure that you put into your mind that you don't want to take this test again. You don't want to be rushing through these questions. Take your time. And if you don't know one of them, mark it and come back to it. Okay? So then, when you get to question 250, make sure that you have answered all of the questions in that section, and really each individual section. Don't be having any incompletes or missed or whatever, like missed questions as far as like you haven't even put in an answer. Answer every single question, even if you don't know if it's right. So try and use all of your testing strategies that you all know to try and get it down to at least 2 answers, and just take the best guess that you can. So then you get to question 250. Yay, you've made it. You've done all 250 questions. Click end and make sure that you are proud of yourself, that you just did this exam, and that you give yourself a good pat on the back, because that is awesome, and you just passed the NPTE. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys would like to know about, of things that I did, or if you want me to go into more detail, just let me know. I look forward to hearing from you.